History remembers the legends. The Spitfire that saved Britain, the P-51 Mustang that escorted the bombers to Berlin, and the Zero that dominated the Pacific. These were the triumphs of 20th century engineering, but for every miracle of flight, there was a mechanical nightmare. For every ace pilot, there was a man trapped in a cockpit that was more dangerous than the enemy. Today, we aren't looking at the kings of the sky. We are looking at the flying coffins, the Reichsleiters, and the planes that were so bad that they literally couldn't turn around. From rocket-powered death traps to bombers that caught fire just for fun, these are the top 10 worst aircraft of World War II. Number 10. The BA-349 Natter, Germany. Imagine being a pilot in 1945. Germany is losing and the Allied bombers are everywhere. Your commanders hand you a wooden rocket and tell you to sit on it. This was the BA-349 Natter. This was an emergency fighter. It took off vertically like a missile, fired a nose full of rockets at a bomber, and then, get this, the pilot was supposed to bail out while the engine parachuted back to Earth. The only manned test flight ended exactly how you'd expect. The canopy flew off, the pilot was incapacitated by G-forces, and the aircraft turned into a high-speed lawn dart. It was a desperate, wooden suicide machine that never saw real combat, and honestly, the pilots were probably thankful for that. Number 9. The Douglas TBD Devastator USA. In 1935, the Devastator was revolutionary. It was the first all-metal monoplane torpedo bomber for the US Navy. But aviation moved fast in the 1930s. By the time 1942 rolled around, the Devastator was only devastating to the men flying it. To drop its torpedo, it had to fly at just 115 miles per hour in a straight line low to the water, against a Japanese carrier's anti-aircraft fire and 0 fighters. It was a sitting duck. At the Battle of Midway, Torpedo Squadron 8 launched 15 Devastators, not one returned. Of the 30 men in those planes, only one survived. It was retired immediately after the battle, a tragic relic of a bygone era. Number 8. The Heinkel He-177 Greif, Germany. This was supposed to be Germany's answer to the B-17, a heavy long-range Greif. But it had a nickname that was much more accurate, the Flying Lighter. To save on drag, engineers crammed 2 engines together to turn a single propeller. It was a cooling nightmare. The power plants frequently overheated and erupted into flames mid-flight. More He-177s were lost to spontaneous combustion than to enemy fire. It was a sophisticated piece of engineering that quite literally burned itself out of the war. Number 7. The Blackburn Botha. If you want to know how bad the Blackburn Botha was, listen to the pilots. They hated it. It was a reconnaissance plane and torpedo bomber that was so underpowered it couldn't even maintain altitude if one engine failed. It had terrible lateral stability, meaning it wobbled through the air like a drunk pigeon. It was withdrawn from the front lines almost instantly. Even as a trainer, it was so dangerous that it was eventually scrapped entirely. When your own flight schools don't want your plane, you know you failed. Number 6. The Messerschmitt Me 163 Comet. The Comet was the world's only rocket-powered interceptor. It could climb to 30,000 feet in 3 minutes. It was faster than anything the Allies had. So why is it on this list? Because it ran on a fuel mixture so volatile, it would dissolve human flesh. If you had a leak, pilots could literally be liquefied in the cockpit. It only had 7 minutes of powered flight, and if the landing wasn't perfect, the remaining fuel would explode on contact with the ground. It was an engineering marvel that killed more of its own pilots than it did Allied bombers. Number 5. The Fairey Battle is the definition of obsolete on arrival. It was a light bomber that was massive, slow, and defended by a single 303 machine gun. In 1939, that was like bringing a knife to a tank fight. During the invasion of France in 1940, battle squadrons were sent to stop the German advance. The result was a massacre. In some missions, 100% of the aircraft were shot down. It was a brave plane flown by brave men, but it had no business being in a modern war. Number 4. The Brewster F2A Buffalo USA. The Buffalo looks like a toy, and against the Japanese Zero, it performed like one. It was overweight, underpowered, and its landing gear was notoriously fragile. While it worked okay for the Finns in the cold north, in the Pacific it was a disaster. Marine pilots at Midway were slaughtered, leading them to call the Buffalo a flying coffin. It was the wrong plane at the wrong time and in the wrong theater. Number 3. The Messerschmitt Me-210. Usually Messerschmitt got it right, but the Me-210, they almost went bankrupt. It was designed to replace the Bf-110, but it was aerodynamically cursed. It had a terrifying tendency to enter uncontrollable flat spins. Pilots lived in constant fear that the plane would simply fall out of the sky for no reason. Production was eventually halted for a massive redesign, which became the Me-410, but the damage was done. The Me-210 remains a stain on a legendary company's record. Number 2. The Blackburn Roc. Back to the Blackburn. The Roc was a turret fighter. It had 0 forward-firing guns. To shoot someone, you'd have to fly alongside them and have a gunner aim the heavy drag-inducing turret. The weight of that turret made the Roc slower than the bombers it was trying to catch. In its entire career, it achieved only 1 confirmed kill. Just 1. It was quickly relegated to towing targets, which was the only thing it was actually fast to do. At number 1, we have a plane that actually looks like a winner. The Breda BA-88 Lince was a record-breaking racer in the late 30s. It was sleek, fast, and beautiful. Then they added guns. The military equipment added so much weight that the engines simply couldn't handle it. In North Africa, it was so underpowered that it could barely stay in the air. Legend has it that pilots had to take off in the exact direction they wanted to go because the plane didn't have enough power to perform a bank turn without stalling. Eventually, they just stripped the engines off the airframes and used them as decoys on airfields. When your plane is more useful as a stationary hunk of metal than a flying machine, you have officially won the title of the worst aircraft of World War II. It is easy to look back at these designs and laugh, but every one of these planes was flown by crews who did their best with what they were given. Engineering in wartime is a gamble, and those were the losing hands. But what do you think? Did I miss a plane that belongs on this list, or do you think the Me-163 was actually a stroke of genius? That just needed more time. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into military hardware, make sure to hit that like button because it really helps the channel grow. And if you want more technical breakdowns, size comparisons, and history's biggest engineering fails, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.